Hello, my nerds, and thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the DM Zach Show. This episode, I am sitting down with Ellen, who is a Washington Capitals fan, so we can just start booing that right now. Boo! But also is part of a awesome little podcast that takes place using the Savage World system called Birdhouse Mysteries. She's also part of a live stream called CFT RPG that is, kind of doing like a revamped Savage Worlds Ravenloft Curse of Strahd hybrid looking thing going on. It's pretty freaking neat, man. I checked it out and I loved it. So definitely go swing on over and check that out. What else? You know what? I think that's it. Yeah, let's fucking get it going. Let's go. All right, so we're joined here by Ellen, who got a hold of me on Twitter during that mad dash of all the interviews and stuff like that. So, Ellen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell people where they can find you and if you got any things to promote, which I know you do.
Sure. Yeah, hi, I'm Ellen Delina. That's my Twitter handle, Ellen_Delina. You can find me there most days, all day, every day, pretty much. I also run the Twitter for the podcast that I run in GM, the Birdhouse Mysteries podcast, which is at Birdhouse Mist, MYST. I currently run that. You can find it on Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, anywhere you find podcasts. It's a Savage Worlds fantasy actual play.
Ooh,
And actually
Worlds.
Yeah. Actually,
Cool.
we originally wanted to start in 5e and decided to move to Savage Worlds instead.
Okay, I'm gonna hit you up on some questions on some Savage Worlds because I hear a lot about it and I've never played it, but the mechanics and stuff like that are something from what I've heard of or sound like something that I would be really interested in. Plus it's got a cool name, Savage Worlds. Like, come on, let's go, right? Like yeah, anything else?
Yes. Let's see. Oh, starting Wednesday next week, the 12th at 8 p.m. Central or 9 p.m. Eastern, you can find me on a Savage Worlds Curse of Strahd stream with a little bit of rippers thrown in for good measure. And I will be playing, I won't be GMing, and that'll be on twitch.tv/CFTRPG. And then starting later in September, I'll be playing in an all-women's D&D 5e stream with more info on that to come at a later date. And then this Saturday, sorry, I have a lot.
No, do it. Pump it. Let's go. It's
and
awesome.
On this Saturday, I'm guesting in a stream on GM Table, their Twitch. It's twitch.tv/GM Table. And that'll be the second of 3 games for Survive This Fantasy that is promoted by Bloat Games. So it's a cool little stream that we've got going, and yeah, so that's where you can find me. It's a lot of places, but always on Twitter.
You're like all over the place. You're very like how many games you playing in a week then, roughly?
Well, the one is just 3 weeks, so it's limited. The Curse of Strahd stream is actually going to be every other Wednesday instead of every week.
Oh, okay, bi-weekly, nice.
Yeah. So okay. that'll limit it a little bit.
Yeah.
But the Saturday stream is going to be weekly, and then I'm doing my podcast. We play weekly and our episodes come out weekly, but there's about a 2-month gap in between when we play and when that actually goes up.
Nice. That's yeah, I've slowly been figuring out that a lot of people, because I've interviewed a few podcasters and stuff like that, and they've it seems like they all kind of have a nice little backlog or delay in the recordings, which is pretty cool. So why don't we actually go on to your podcast here a little bit? So what is the story and stuff like that, and how did you get started and decide you wanted to start recording for it and stuff?
Sure. Well, I was playing in a couple of games, but I really wanted to. I gotten more into DMing or GMing,
Mm-hmm.
more GMing because I'm doing more Savage Worlds than D&D these days.
Yeah.
And I kind of just decided. I was talking to my brother, who also is he's on the Birdhouse Mysteries podcast with me. He's a player, and he's big into RPGs as well. And so we just kind of decided, we were like, hey, we could probably do a podcast. And we kind of just started it. We got 3 of our friends to join, and they were all down with it. And for the most part, running an RPG podcast is not that different from just running a game. You're just recording it, and it means that you have to edit down your audio every week for
Mm-hmm.
public consumption. But other than that, like, most of it stays the same. You get a little bit more theatrical with how you're playing, but I find that on the GM side, it's pretty much the same. I want to create a good story, and hopefully I am.
Yeah, no, that's what I like about the DMing aspect or GMing is the really it's just creating that awesome story for the players is just what I'm really all here for. Like it's so awesome when your players kind of give you that, oh my god, that was so cool moment and stuff like that. It just totally pumps my tires. Just like my ego goes like fuck soaring right through the roof. Yeah, so when did you first start playing tabletop RPGs?
I first started about 5 or 6 years ago. It was after college, which is kind of unfortunate because it would have been really fun to play in college.
Yeah.
But I only started because I started watching Critical Role, and I started listening to the Adventure Zone.
Oh yeah, I love the Adventure Zone.
Yeah. And so those two things together kind of got me and my brother at the same time into D&D. And then from D&D we went into Savage Worlds. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's where I am right now.
So what is Savage Worlds? Let's hit on that a little bit.
Sure. Savage Worlds is a base system. So if you want to run a fantasy game, if you want to run a space game, if you want to run a Wild West game, if you want to run a Wild West game that also has monsters, that's Deadlands. You can do it. If you want to run a game like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, except you're in college, you can run it. It's East Texas University. There's all kinds of settings for it. And I named 2 of the big ones. There's also Rippers and Hellfrost and Deadlands Noir, all kinds of different settings for it. But the purpose of Savage Worlds is to be one system that a GM and some players can learn and that can be used across any genre that you want to play.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so smart by the guys that did that. Like, I mean, to just create a system that you can just spread across every genre is a brilliant move.
And it's great. Like, we're using it for fantasy. Not a lot of people use it for fantasy because most people go to your D&D or your Pathfinder for your fantasy. But that's part of what we want to do with our podcast, to show, hey, you can use Savage Worlds for fantasy. And it's a robust system that lets you do what you want with it. You can bring what you want to the table, and it's very easy to create new races. It's very easy to create new spells, which are called powers in Savage Worlds, or enemies, anything you want. It's very simple to create, and it's great on the GM end because, well, for just one example of how it's different than D&D, there's no hit points.
Oh, really? No hit points. Oh, yeah.
No
I
hit
think you
points.
can only get hit 3 times or something.
Yes. You can, well, if you're a wild card, and every player character is something called a wild card, and that means 2 things: that you can take 3 wounds before you go down and you're incapacitated, and that every time you roll, other than damage, every time you roll a trait roll, you get to roll an extra d6 with it, and that's called your wild die. And so it gives you 2 chances on every roll to succeed, because the target number, or the DC in D&D, is usually 4, and it usually gets modified up or down by 2 every time. So like a really hard thing will be at 8, but it makes it a little more math light compared to D&D.
So are you playing only with D6s?
No, you play with all of your dice except the D20, although the GM does use the D20.
Okay.
So how it works is you essentially point by, you have your attributes and your skills, and you determine by die type how good you are at a skill. So if you want to have a spellcaster, you would have you would increase your smarts to maybe a D8 in character creation, and then you would try to increase your spellcasting skill in order to cast your spells to a D8 or a D10 even, if you wanted. And so you roll that every time you make your attack, and the higher your dice type, the more likely you are to beat that 4 that you need.
Oh, okay. I see what's going on. That's a really interesting and nice, easy way to figure it out.
Yeah. It makes it really easy to, you don't have to be like, oh, am I proficient in this? What am I adding? What am I doing? Like what's the modifier for this given skill? You're like, okay, I'm shooting something. I have a D6 in shooting. I'm going to roll my D6 and my wild die, and I'm going to see what I get.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. Do you know where someone can pick up Savage Worlds actually? Because I'm actually pretty curious in it.
Yeah. It's made by a company called Pinnacle Entertainment Games, I want to say. It's Peg Inc. That's their website. And so you can get the second printing of the Savage Worlds Adventure Edition core rulebook on their website. They just updated it, and they just put out the new printing like last week, I think, or maybe this week.
Oh, damn. So it's brand new. Okay, very good time to hop on the train.
The second printing is new. It came out, I want to say it came out 2018. The Adventure Edition. So a lot of the settings are still being updated for the Adventure Edition. They call it SWADE, Savage Worlds AD Adventure Edition E. So SWADE, just for social media purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever see me writing out SWADE, it's so that I don't get picked up by the Savage Worlds bot that picks up every time somebody on Twitter uses the phrase Savage Worlds together.
Okay, yeah, smart. So what do you prefer? You prefer in the Savage Worlds a little bit more than the 5e?
I played both, but I have to tell you, except for very rare occasions, combat just goes so much smoother in Savage Worlds than it does in 5e. It's just a lot quicker, and there's also this is for some people a plus and for some people a minus, but it's a lot easier for player characters to potentially die in Savage Worlds, which is why it's savage. It's not savage like primitive, it's savage like brutal.
Yeah. Well, I see that with like the 3 wounds, right? I mean,
yeah.
That's essentially 3 rounds of combat. That's 3 wounds. I mean, if your character can if your character gets hit 3 times in one round, then he's done.
Sometimes it can be 3 times in one attack. Because the other thing about Savage Worlds that's really fun for the player characters, but also
holy fuck.
Yeah. It's also fun for the GM is your dice explode. So when you roll a 6 on a d6 or an 8 on a d8 or 10, 12, etc., you get to re-roll and add the total together. So if you roll a bunch of 6s in a row, I've had players go up to like 29 damage in one hit. And if that's the case, based on their toughness and, some of their derived stats, you're going to be dead in one hit if that happens. We actually just had in our most recent session that we played, one of the characters was kind of sitting off by himself waiting for what everybody else was doing to be over. And one of the other characters, she decided that she wanted him to come play with them and like play around, mess around. And so she threw her boomerang at him. So I had her roll an attack because she didn't say that she was rolling non-lethal damage. And she the attack went off, it hit him, and she rolled a 23 on her damage. And so if she had rolled a 24, she would have killed him in one hit.
Holy smokes. So
Yep.
how do you handle that as a DM? Like, do you have your players or GM? Do you have your players with backup characters always on the ready to go, or like do your players even get that invested into their characters?
Yes. Well, the characters we have currently are the characters that started at the beginning of the podcast. So they've had them for 19 sessions, which is probably like 19 times. We get about 3 episodes per session because we go so long when we play. So 19 times 3 episodes potentially. And we still have the same player or the same characters. They do get very invested in them, but they also have to get invested in their backup characters. And I've created in my world, there is the material plane that they all live on, obviously, but part of the plot that they are interacting with is a plane called the Plane of Magic. And so they keep accidentally or sometimes on purpose going into the Plane of Magic. And I've told them, hey, they had an encounter with vampires a few weeks back that could have been pretty deadly. And I was like, hey, maybe in addition to your material plane backup character, you also have a Plane of Magic backup character that you could play if your character dies. So they do manage to get invested in both characters, and it's just kind of, our Discord is kind of fun sometimes, like throwing around ideas about new characters and your current character, and it's all fun. But it's one of the things that I like compared to D&D, because once you hit, like, I think statistically, like once you hit like level 5, you are much less likely to have a character die.
Okay.
Just because of like access to spells that resurrect. In Savage Worlds, there are resurrection spells, but they're much higher level powers, and they have a much greater chance of failure than compared to like D&D.
Okay. So when your players are like, was it a difficult learning curve for them to figure out Savage Worlds? Like what, is it all new spells and stuff like that, or is it pretty 5e crossover heavy and stuff like that?
Well, the thing about Savage Worlds is with their powers, they are designed to be like an amalgamation of all of the available powers in D&D. Like, for example, you have a bunch of different like point and shoot magic powers or spells in D&D. In Savage Worlds, you have bolts or you have blasts. And the way they work is you have your character pick a trapping. So you decide, oh, I want my bolt to do acid damage, or I want my bolt to do ice or fire or lightning. And you describe it differently based on what it is for that character. But the same character might be kind of like mimicking a D&D druid, and they might use like wind magic with their bolt, whereas
I get what you're saying now.
yeah, whereas a weird scientist might use bolt, and it's like a lightning gun that they shoot. So it's the same power, but it does different things based on the trappings. And so in that way, instead of having a million different spells, you have, I want to say, around 50 maybe spells total, powers.
Yeah.
And they can
But
take on different attributes based on the trappings you give them.
yeah, okay. So I see. So it's nice and customizable and stuff like that. And your players just, I mean, it's really up to your player's imagination. This game sounds like
Yeah.
it's more on the player and you guys, your imagination to see what you guys can kind of come up with.
Yes. And to answer your other question that I didn't get to, whether or not it was difficult for them to pick up, it really wasn't. Like, some of the some of the things were hard in the beginning, like remembering to re-roll if you aced on your die. Like I would occasionally have to, like, they would say what they're, we do it all over Discord, so we're remote. So they would tell me their rolls, and I'd be like, okay, you rolled a 6 on a d6, roll it again and add the total, that sort of thing. And sometimes it was a little tricky just to like be like, okay, which die do I need to be rolling for this skill? But the way the character sheet is laid out for Savage Worlds, it has you it has little pictures of all the dice types laid out, and you fill in the one that your skill is up to. So once you get used to that and looking at that instead of like thinking about what you add to a roll, it's just changing your like way of approaching the game. And once you can
Nice.
make that difference, it flows pretty smooth, I think.
It definitely sounds like it has a lot more smooth flow to it. Where, like yeah, I would say the thing that I dislike the most about D&D is its combat, and I feel like Savage Worlds, the way you're describing it to me right now, definitely feels like it makes combat a lot more spicy and intense, right? Like it's interesting for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, the
So
threat of death is always a way to make it spicier.
yeah, definitely. And that's something like it's kind of hard to balance encounters and stuff like that in 5e too. I find like, well, like, sorry, I should say like smooth running encounters in 5e and stuff like that, where yeah, sometimes it is hard to make death feel like a serious threat and stuff. So what do you prefer being? Do you prefer being a player or a dungeon master or
Um,
GM?
in D&D, I prefer playing to DMing, but in Savage Worlds, I absolutely prefer GMing. It's just like you said before, you get a rush when you're done with a session and your players are like, "Oh my god, that was so cool." It's just it's really great to be able to own something and
Yeah.
create it.
Yeah, and Savage Worlds, like the whole imagination aspect, it almost, yeah, like I feel like you can really pour in a lot into it since it is such a nice like broad system, right?
Mhm. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't want to say like D&D you don't use your imagination or anything like that.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think, yeah. Okay, so when you first started playing D&D, what was your favorite race to play?
My favorite race.
It doesn't even have to
Well,
be D&D. It could be any actually game. Like what is your favorite race to play in general?
well, there's always this is the boring answer, but there's always something to be said for human
Yeah, I feel that too.
because especially because it has approximately the same mechanical benefit in both D&D and Savage Worlds. If you're playing variant human, you get to pick a feat. If you are playing just a regular human in Savage Worlds, you get to a free edge, which serves approximately the same purpose as the feats in 5e. And
Okay,
so,
cool.
yeah, so and that just goes to show that like the story behind that mechanic is just that, you know, humans are adaptable and they can uh adapt to any given number of things. So you have these different uh like very defined personality traits or quirks or something that changes them
Yeah,
and make
I
go ahead.
I love playing humans, honestly. Like they get shit on quite a bit, but they're fun. I don't know, they're just adaptable, like you said, to every situation. And there's something said to be, or sorry, there's something to say about that, right? Or yeah, it's just they're nice, they're easy to kind of throw in and stuff like that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that's a reason why people should be, crapping on them and stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And plus like this is the most boring answer I could give, but you know, we're human and there's
Mm-hmm.
something to be said for playing somebody similar, like more similar to yourself in a game.
Yep.
That makes a big difference. But in terms of like non-mundane race, I would say um one of my favorite characters that I played in D&D was a tabaxi, and there's an equivalent in Savage Worlds, Rakashans. They are like cat people
Oh,
as
cool.
well. And
Like Rakshaskas or whatever the heck they are, like the monster race in 5e. Rakashas.
Rakshasa, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a hard word to say.
Yeah. I do like them. They're fun. I had a lot of fun playing a tabaxi character. She was actually a cleric, and she would get distracted a lot because of that like cat like interest that they say that tabaxi have. They all have a quirk, and so her quirk was being into like research, and she like
Okay.
would get, once she got started she couldn't stop, so she was a knowledge cleric.
Cool.
Yeah.
That was one of your characters, correct? Yeah, like the
Yeah.
tabaxi. Yeah. The research based stuff. So was one of your main driving factors for that character like always, like was that your whole pursuit of your character, was to always just to seek greater knowledge and stuff like that?
Yes and no. That was more like that was definitely her quirk, and that was her general approach to problems. She would be like, "Okay, what can I learn about something in order to solve this problem?" But her backstory was more centered around like the destruction of her village by some demons, and so she like wanted to find this probably a pit fiend. I don't know for sure if it was a pit fiend, because I didn't get to play that far into the campaign with her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but find this pit fiend that destroyed her village and exact revenge and stuff like that. So that was like her main backstory driving force. But when it came to everyday interaction, she was absolutely just like, all right, how can I research this problem and solve it?
Was that your favorite character you've ever played?
See, when you ask about favorite characters, it's like picking your children. You can't. I love them all. Um,
um, what's your most recent character then? I want to hear about that one.
okay. Um, actually, well, there's one I'm playing in a home game, and then
Okay.
there's one that I'm making for this upcoming stream.
Ooh,
And
do you want to talk about that one?
yes, I do. But I also don't want to say too much because I don't know for sure if I'm going to play her, because we haven't had our like
Oh.
session 0 yet. And
Ah.
so we still have to learn exactly what the campaign's going to be about. So I'm like 85% sure that I'm going to be playing this character. But you know, that extra 15% is there that I could be changing based on what the campaign is supposed to be about. But yeah, I have played a lot of rogues. I played a lot of clerics, and I'm currently playing a monk in a home game.
Uh-huh.
Um so I've never done a paladin, but I've always been really attracted to that um class just because they have a little bit of everything. They have the spell casting, and they have the like melee buffness and damage.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's what I'm thinking of, a redemption paladin. So she's not
Ooh,
one to always kill all of her enemies. Um
that'd be
she's kind of
cool.
a gentler, kinder paladin, but
Yeah, that's a what kind of race you thinking?
I'm thinking ASMR for her.
Ooh, nice. See, I have the fallen Asmar or Scourge Asmar or something like that. Paladin in my campaign, and her name's Solace, and a lot of fun. Really cool, really cool character. So I would, yeah, that's a really good choice. What drew you to the Asmar?
Well, I like the aspect. I'm saying in her backstory that the rest of her family is ostensibly human. I like that aspect that you could, like with tieflings and ASMR, you could have both like a completely normal human family, and then one child pops up and is a different racial
Oh,
makeup than
cool.
you. And that's not because of infidelity, it's just because of like way back in your lineage you had like celestial, or in the tiefling's case, fiendish um history there.
Yep.
And so I like that. And also, I like how it synergizes with a paladin. You know, they're already devoted to the gods, and they receive dreams from their deva or whatever.
It's one of I hope your DM takes advantage of that. That is such a fun little tool to throw into the game. I was gonna bring that up. To the Deva or the Diva. I can never say it correctly, but
Oh,
yeah,
I
it's a
don't actually know if it's diva or if it's deva. I just
I have
assumed
no
it was deva.
I have no idea either. But like what, because it's only through images, I believe. I don't think they actually speak with you, but one of the things that I've been doing with Solace is I've been sending her through Discord like messages of like cool inspiration art that I find, and I'm like, oh, by the way, you received this image from your Deva tonight in your dream, right? And it's just a cool way to add flavor to the game, and it predicts the future a little bit. I'm using it to kind of like drive the campaign almost. And it's been a lot of fun using that.
Yeah, that's really cool, and I think that's great. Like the Tabaxi that I mentioned before,
Mm-hmm.
um the reason that her village was destroyed was because they were harboring an Asimar
Oh,
who
cool.
who the demons wanted to either capture or kill. I don't even rightly
Oh.
know. Um and so just that idea that you have a greater like potentially cosmological, you know, like bent to your character is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And even if it's just, you know, you get weird visions at night, it
Still
definitely
adds
like,
though.
oh yeah, absolutely.
And it's nice little flavor too, right? Like especially if you're, like those little background quirks that are in the races and stuff like that. Those are some of my favorite parts about picking out races to play. Like, like dwarves are super into rock. So I remember playing a cleric that was like an that took the archaeologist background, and he was like, anytime we were in a cave, I'm like, do I see any cool gems around here that my character can drool over? Right, like so, like and like gnomes, they tinkerers and stuff like that. That's a lot of those are a lot of fun little flavor aspects to sprinkle into the games.
Mhm. And I just want to say, I personally love the archaeologist and anthropologist backgrounds. Like I've taken them with more than a couple of characters that I've played.
They're so fun.
They're so fun.
Yeah, I love it. Like, anytime you get like a cool I don't know, you walk up to like a ruined village or something like that, you're like, "Oh man, let me go all over this. Like, let's see any kind of cool runes or anything I can find." That's yeah, those are a lot of fun backgrounds. There's actually a new Unearthed Arcana just kind of released a couple of weeks ago, and it had a chef background that I was super like, oh, that's a really fucking cool background. I can't remember exactly what it did. I think you're allowed to cook like gourmet meals for like your players and stuff like that. And it came, can't remember what else, but it was definitely a neat one.
That's really fun. One of my fellow players in our home game, she personally is really into baking and cooking, and so
Hmm.
she wanted in her background to be like, "Oh, I want something about baking to be in my background."
Yeah, it's
So
fun.
yeah, she would absolutely be interested in that Unearthed Arcana background.
I'll have to find that. I'll link it to you. It's a cool, because I think the whole Unearthed Arcana is like different backgrounds. I think it's like 10 or 15 different backgrounds or something like that. So it's nice. And those are, I don't, like I said before, I really like the flavor, the fluff of D&D, you know what I mean? The stuff that makes the world feel alive.
Mhm.
So when I see stuff like the chef background and stuff, I'm like, it just, I don't know, it just helps drive it and in the creativity and stuff like that. And like one of my favorite magic items I ever gave my players is it's just a bottle of ever-changing spices. So all they have to do is just whisper what kind of spice they want, and then it will appear in their little bottle. But they like Solace, once again, she uses it to cook gourmet meals for the players because she likes it, and she'll also send like Pinterest photos or like GIF recipes of like what she's cooking for dinner tonight for the party. So, so
That's really cute. I like that.
Yeah, it's those little flavor things, even though they don't necessarily have a big impact on the game, I still feel like are definitely vital to the game.
Yeah. Well, those are the kinds of little details that you're gonna remember. I
Yeah.
mean, you're not gonna remember how much damage you did to an enemy, but you will remember, oh, Solace cooking this gourmet meal for us when we had downtime, and maybe the stories that came from that dinner you guys had, the stories you told each other.
And those are also really good RP moments too. If you're like, setting up camp and stuff like that, and you can kind of as a GM, you kind of pick up on the vibe of your party and stuff like that, and what kind of game it's going to be. And if you can tell that they're like, kind of wanting to have a little RP session, maybe just like, have the night and let them RP around the campfire for a little bit. That's also awesome for you as a dungeon master, because you just get to sit back and like, you think about things, and you're, just enjoy the show essentially.
The GM for the Curse of Strahd game
Hmm.
that I'm going to be in actually tweeted this last month. But I took a screenshot because I liked it so much. You used decks of cards in Savage Worlds a lot because that's how you deal out initiative. Uh,
Okay.
so you
Oh, you
always,
deal interesting.
yeah, I'll touch on that immediately after. But so you always have a deck of cards on hand. So the tip was when the party has downtime during rest, have them pull a card and tell a story about their character. And so if you get a heart, it's a love story. If you get a diamond, it's a victory story. Spade, it's a tragic tale, or a club is a tragic tale, and a spade is a tale of loss and defeat. And so if you have them, I haven't gotten my players to do this yet because they haven't had well, they had downtime in our last session, but they used it very differently than I thought they were going to.
Yeah,
Um,
as is the case as
yeah,
every time.
but I really like that as a tool to just encourage players to talk to each other in character. Not that mine have any particular problem doing that; they're very good at it, which I appreciate as a GM. Um,
Yeah.
Oh, but initiative. The way that it's different in Savage Worlds is you pull out a deck, so there's no addition, subtraction, anything. High card goes first. If you get the Joker, you leave the Jokers in. If you get the Joker, you get bonuses to your attacks and damage, and you also get an extra Benny. Bennies are little tokens that you get that you can use to soak up wounds or re-roll bad rolls, stuff like that. And so
Oh,
they're
cool.
very valuable. Um, but yeah, so you deal initiative every round, and the idea is battle is dynamic and fluid. So instead of that D&D like you roll initiative and that's your order forever, you could have the enemy going back to back in different rounds possibly, or it's different every time, and it shakes it up, and it makes it so that there's less time to be sitting back and like maybe using your phone because it's not your turn kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. Keeps you in the immersed. It seems like it's really quick. You know what I
It
mean?
is.
Like and that's nice, because shit, I've had, you can have combat take, oh man, so long sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm really gonna have to look into the Savage Worlds here. You should be a spokesman or something for them, because like you're really pitching it nice.
It's so much fun.
It sounds so much fun, and I keep on hearing it in like other podcasts. Like they'll be like, "Oh, my other game that I'm running, Savage Worlds," right? And I just keep on hearing it a lot, and I've always looked into it, and I know that it's really accessible, but it sounds super fun. It just
Mhm.
sounds better, to be honest.
And I
Um,
mean, it's not to pit the two against each other. I like them differently for different things.
mhm.
Um, but when it comes to just running a game, I prefer Savage Worlds because it is in most cases quicker and like just simpler to run because it's designed to be like lower math and or less math
Yeah,
than your D20 system.
that's very true, because like, yeah, when you're saying this, I'm picturing it as like a dungeon master setting up a game. When I hear, they only got like 3 wounds, but then there's just some like a band-aid that soaks up the wound so that they can regain I'm like, okay, that's perfect. That's so nice and easy. It's like a little token that they get.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And the GM gets bennies as well. The players can earn them throughout a session by doing good RP. And so I'm terrible at remembering to award them. So sometimes it'll happen. They're like, I'm going to spend a Benny. And I was like, oh, you guys all get a Benny for your good RP that you did before.
Yeah, that's like inspiration in D&D. I'm horrible at giving it out.
Yeah. But the GM also gets bennies technically, but I find that I never use them except if they are battling like a boss character, somebody who would need a little extra push, is a little meaner, a little harder to beat. So you can use them to re-roll your own rolls too as well.
Ooh, okay, nice. Well, sticking with like talking about the Savage Worlds and stuff, why don't we like talk about your campaign a bit? The Birdhouse Mysteries. That is it, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
You got
Birdhouse Mystery. Yeah, so like what's going on there? What's the story in this world?
All right, so it is a completely homebrew world that I made up. It's called Kadrinda.
Ooh, nice name.
Thanks. It is a planet not unlike our own, except very unlike our own in that there is magic and that there are other races than human and stuff like that. But what happened was the 4 player characters each have their own reasons for wanting to travel to the city of nowhere, which is in the middle of a desert, a big desert. So it was an arduous travel to get there. That's what our session 0 were. I did 2 session 0, one with Brian and Chris, half of the party, and then the other with Tess and Maggie, the other half of the party, just so that they could meet each other before we got into session 1.
Yeah, session zeros are a nice thing to run.
Yes. Also because while Brian, my brother, had played Savage Worlds before, none of the others had ever played it before. So we just needed to, take a few baby steps, like have maybe one combat encounter just to get them used to what you're supposed to be doing before we jumped in. But
Yeah.
each of the characters has a reason to be going to nowhere where there are seers who can see the future, and ostensibly what they see is something that will actually come true. And so they were traveling there to have their futures told for their various reasons, and they encountered a cult when they got there.
Shit.
And actually, initially what I planned out was they were going to be solving the disappearance of a local heiress, and they were going to be finding her. But what I didn't plan on was one of my players also having the same reason that the cult would be after them. So the reason that they were after Anaya, the NPC, is because she had celestial blood in her. She's essentially an Aasimar.
Okay, cool.
And one of my player characters picked Aasimar when we thought we were doing 5e. And so we created that race for her in Savage Worlds. And so she's celestial blooded. And so for that reason, I was like, okay, well, the cult would also be after Tessa's character, Avriel. So they had a direct reason to get involved with the plot because it was directly affecting her character as well.
Yeah,
So
that fit nice.
yeah, it really did. It would fit better than I could have planned for, as you can see. But so they met at the Birdhouse, which is sometimes it's a tavern, sometimes it's a healer's hut, sometimes it's an enchanter's tower, sometimes
Oh, cool.
well, it depends on the city. All the major cities have a birdhouse, and they're so named because the organization that created them is mostly avian folk, so essentially Aarakocra in D&D terms.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're colloquially named as the birdhouse because they are run by a bird.
That's awesome. Did you
Yeah.
make it up yourself? Like that's all, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's so cool. That's so creative.
Thanks. And so each birdhouse has a different roost master, and that roost master has a different specialty. And so the one in Nowhere, her name is Calcutta. I tend to name my avian folk after real life cities, just because I thought that was a cute naming convention.
Oh, that
Um,
is. I like that.
hey, Calcutta is a seer, and so they were all going there to see Calcutta and have her tell their futures. But as soon as they stepped in her door, she saw them, and she said that she had seen them in her vision of her friend Anaya going missing. And so she immediately asked them for help. And in order to get their futures told, they had to kind of, go find Anaya and figure out what was going on, rescue her, that sort of thing. And then they were able to get to know each other and form a party and become a more or less cohesive unit together.
That's a really cool way to bring the party together. Much more better than the standard 4 strangers sitting in a tavern.
Technically speaking, they did meet in a tavern because the birdhouse there in Nowhere is a tavern and inn.
Okay.
But I made sure when I was sending out like the character design document, I was like, your character has to have something that they desire. Doesn't have to be like tangible, but it does have to be something they desire enough that they would travel the world to find it or achieve it.
Yeah, a
And
nice
so,
way to it's a nice way to bring them into or make them invested into the game, right?
yes, absolutely.
It's a good trick to have up your sleeve as a dungeon master or game master, is to make sure that your characters do have a reason to be out adventuring, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and that's my biggest thing with characters that I create now as well. I make sure that they have something they desire, whether tangible or intangible, that they're going out and seeking, so
Yes.
that I can give that to my GM or my DM and be like, hey, this is my goal. There's going to be other goals that happen alongside like party goals, but this is definitely what
Yeah.
I'm seeking.
And don't you love it when your players give you that as a GM? Like, it's
Yeah.
awesome when your players give you stuff like that. I don't know why sometimes players, I mean, I kind of understand, but sometimes it feels like they get a little scared to talk with the game master. And at least for me, I'm very opposite. The more my players talk with me, the more I can like put into the game for them, and it's just it's easy then that way they're invested into the game, and I don't really have to do that much work to think of why I need to make them invested into the game. They've already given me a reason and told
Yes.
me why they want to be in the game, right? So
Absolutely, I agree 100%. That's why I like leaving, and I like asking my players to leave holes in their background for like
yes.
me to fill in, and that
Hmm.
way they know what they're after, but it might be a little bit different in reality what plays out. And so they can get a little bit surprised and that much more reinvested in that situation.
Yeah, it's important. Another thing too is like I wish players sometimes would kind of wait. It's always good to go to session 0 with an idea of what you want to do. Like almost like exactly what you're doing here with your with your Asmar or Asmar paladin, where you got an idea of what you want, but you're okay if you got to change it a little bit to fit the cohesion of the party. It's kind of when I'm starting up new games and a player sends me their character sheets with like a 15-page backstory, I'm like, yeah, but like, what happens if this doesn't necessarily fit or work with what's going on here, right? Like, and so I don't know the flexibility of the session 0 and having people kind of all sit down and with a loose idea of characters and then molding them into a finished party is nice too.
Hmm. Definitely. And yeah, I will say I fell into the trap, and I still have her, my first character, and I still want to see her story play out someday. But
Hmm.
her background document is like 16 pages. I went all out. I was like, here are all the NPCs in town that she knows and blah blah blah. And so I'm sure there are some DMs or GMs who would be like very thankful to receive that. But at the same time, it's like you went a little overboard, and I
Yeah.
know that I went a little overboard. So for my newest character, it's like 2 pages, and most of it is bullet points instead
Yeah.
of like big paragraphs.
Well, that's just it. We don't. We want backstory. We love backstory. It helps us so much. But like, we don't need to know who your third cousin is and why he got stabbed on a boat, right? Like that, unless if it super duper ties into whatever's going on in your backstory. But I mean, like for the most part, yeah, like I don't know. If you keep it just nice and open ended is a really good thing too on some certain aspects too, because that like you said allows for surprises, which are so fun to throw in as a DM.
Mhm.
Like so fun when you're like, oh, I know they're gonna be absolutely shocked when they see this, right? Like it's that's what I don't know drives me a little bit too. It's because really, I mean, we're out here trying to make we're just trying to have fun and make sure our players are having fun. That's the whole reason why we all play.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
so
just one more thing on character like creation before we move on. One of the things I like to do and ask for is like a section that's questions for the DM, like based on your background. Like, so for my paladin, like, why was her house destroyed? Like, who are her enemies? What are their goals? And so, just like, these are the things that you are thinking of so that the DM has an idea of where you're at with the backstory.
that is such a good idea.
Thanks.
Like that's a really I'm gonna start making my players do that because that is a really good idea. Because then that I mean, then I know where your mind's at and where you what you're thinking about and stuff like that, and where you want the story to go.
Right. Exactly. And so you have that little bit of shared destiny in the character.
Yeah.
Um
Oh, that's a really good idea. I'm writing that bad boy down now. Like, this is a really good idea. Um, so what's your favorite class to play?
ooh. Hmm. My favorite class, well in D&D, it's a toss up between a rogue and a cleric.
What do you
I
like
just
about the rogue?
um I love mostly I love the skills, the number of skills that you get to have because I love rolling skill rolls. I
Mm-hmm.
love to have like a plus 12 in perception, you know. I love to be able
Yeah.
to see everything. I love being able to like sneak around and be good at things. And so I love being the skill monkey with the rogue. Um sneak attack's great, and the subclasses, the rogue has tons of subclasses, and a lot of them are really good. My favorite is the inquisitive rogue.
I got an inquisitive rogue in my campaign. It's awesome. It's super smart, spots traps from 3 miles away. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's a fun class to it seems like a really fun class to play.
yeah. And being able to give yourself sneak attack if somebody isn't like in combat with the enemy that
Oh,
you want,
yeah,
like
what the hell's that called?
insightful fighting, I think.
Yeah, Josephine's her name. She's always like, "Can I insightful fighting that?" And I'm like, "What is that? What is that?" Every time I'm like, "Okay, I got sneak attack on it." I'm like, you got
Yeah,
sneak attack on everything."
yeah. It's so much fun. And it's a bonus action, so it's great.
Yeah, yeah.
And then cleric, I like every flavor of cleric. I have a soft place in my heart for knowledge cleric because again, you get to be a skill monkey. Um, and I love knowledge gods like Ioun and Ogma and
Hmm.
the others. Um, but clerics are just really fun because they can be big and beefy, but they also have such a wide spell pool. It's
Yeah.
so much fun to play.
I played a forge cleric, and his name was Korak, and he was like, "Oh, so fun using heat metal and stuff like that." It was just that was probably one of my favorite characters I've ever played. Didn't play them for long, but just the whole forge cleric domain was just wicked.
Yeah. That's a really good one. Plus you get to what is it? The feature. You get to like make
And
your own armor and
magical art, you can like
yeah.
yeah, you get to make your own plus ones and plus twos. I think
Yeah.
essentially is what it is. But yeah, and like Korak's thing was his like I would yeah, you'd like wake up and you'd see me working on it around the campfire. I'd always make sure I was like the first one up, and I'd just like be sitting there and cranking away and working away on my items and hammering and stuff. It was yeah, a love. I love clerics too. I think clerics are my favorite class.
Mm-hmm. They're good class. They're good. And then so under rogue and cleric would be monk. So monk
Yeah.
is in second place, and rogue and cleric are tied for first.
Monks are fun in the set. I like how they can catch shit and throw it back at the people
Mhm.
that like shot arrows at them. Just like that's such a fun flavor thing to have in there too. Monks are good. What kind of monk do you play normally?
The one that I'm playing in my home game is a Kensei monk.
Is
So
that the one that specializes in weapons?
yes, so they're
So,
basically like samurai. It's really cool.
ooh, that is really cool. Oh, I like how you went samurai with the monk versus like samurai with a fighter.
Yeah, there is isn't there a samurai essentially subclass for the fighter?
There
Something
is,
similar.
There is, but I feel like the monk fits a little bit nicer because it's the monks are like super swift and stuff like that, stealthy and I feel like fighters are clunky and
Yeah.
stuff. Whereas the samurais, I don't think samurais are clunky in history. Were they, or were they pretty swift and stealthy?
Um,
I
that
honestly,
I don't know historically, but I just like I know that they had like great command of a multitude of weapons, and so that's why my mind goes there with the monk.
ooh,
Plus,
cool,
plus the weapon that I'm using is a katana,
nice,
her main weapon.
nice. Yeah, I've once again played a monk for a little bit, but not much. But it's always one that I've wanted to try out a bit more, and I really like watching Critical Role, like Bo.
Mhm.
Bo's a good monk and stuff like that. Yeah, that's a good class. So what would you say is probably one of your more memorable moments with your actually can we do what's one of your more memorable moments with your party, like in your Birdhouse Mysteries?
Sure. This hasn't aired yet. It will be airing soon, probably within the next 2 or 3 episodes going up, just based on where I am in editing. But they eventually left nowhere to go to another town following the cultists. And the town they're going to, you have to travel north through the desert, through the mountains, like down a river to get to the coast. And so the city, well, no, the town, very much a town, a small town, in the center, in between Nowhere and Aricia, is a little like tiny Pueblo town called Scarbantia. And they went there, and I wasn't really expecting anything of their stay in Scarbantia. I thought that they would get there, they would hire a boat, and they would go downriver. Well, um, I had them engage in a combat encounter as their introduction to the town. And so once they finished that encounter, they were thanked by the mayor of the town and invited into his home and, given a meal, given
Mm-hmm.
lodging for the night. And our roguish character was like, does he have like a study or something like that? Or anything like that?
Oh no, what's
That
the
I
rogue getting up to?
could right? And
You're
I was like, "Yeah, he probably has a study, I guess." Sure. And I was like, "Yeah, it's on the second floor, it's across from one of the bedrooms." And so he goes in and he, like, checks some stuff and he's looking for something,
yeah.
because they know that, the cultists had come through this town. So they find a ledger because I figure, a book of accounts for the city or the town would be there. And they were like, "Okay, so I wanna rifle through. Do I find anything suspicious?" And I was like, "Okay, let me roll and see if they find anything suspicious." I didn't plan for it to happen. It's
Yeah.
just happening. And so I just roll and the dice were like, "Yeah, it could happen." So I give them a little hint. So I'm like on the spot. So I say, "It's in a language you don't know." And I was like, "What languages do you know?"
Yeah.
And so I picked one that he didn't have, and come to find out that he was involved in some shady dealings. And so the party decided that upon finding this out, that they were going to conduct a town satisfaction survey asking people in character, they RP'd this out, asking townspeople if they liked the mayor, if they trusted the mayor, if they thought the mayor was good for the town. And they asked 3 different characters before I had the mayor come out of his home, like into the town square to ask what was going
Yeah.
on. And immediately, Banny, one of our characters, who he's not the rogue, he's the sorcerer, but he has a kind of roguish background. He
Yeah.
immediately starts proclaiming to the town square that the mayor has been, embezzling funds and
That's so funny.
engaging in illegal activities and misusing town money, and they never have a vote or elections for who should be mayor, and he's the judge, jury, and executioner, so this is all wrong. And
You're like, you're probably sitting there just sweating. You're like, what the fuck is going on? Like,
I was laughing, honestly. I thought it was hysterical because they all got into it and they got so
Yeah.
into it. And eventually what happened was that I figured the townspeople would be up in arms about this. And so probably they didn't stick around to see the result of this action. They went and got on a boat and went downriver to Arisi after causing all this trouble. And
classic.
after the rogue went into the house to retrieve the big cask of money that he had received for his illegal dealings, and he came out, and instead of keeping all the money, he was like showering coins like he was handing out candy on Halloween. So he was just throwing coins everywhere in the town square, and then the party left. So I figure they don't know this, but I figure they probably deposed the mayor and he is disgraced and probably left Scarbantia, but and somebody else has taken his place after a rightful election. But that just sticks in my mind because it was so unexpected.
Well, how do you prepare for that you don't prepare for that as a dude.
None of that was prepared.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's so funny, how they just like started an uprising and they're like, all right, okay, sorry guys, we're fucking out of here now. It's like all beating the mayor with sticks and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, oh, but yeah. So what was your plan with the mayor? Like, was he just supposed to be a good guy? You know what I mean? Thanking them. Thank you so much.
Essentially, yeah. I had a name for him and I had a little couple lines of dialogue thanking them for saving the town because I assumed that they would be able to do that. And I figured, he would welcome them into his home and that would be the end of it. So that was the extent I had of him until your best laid plans until your players meet the game.
The rogue, it's always the fucking rogues.
Yeah.
So does this guy got like a study or something I can sneak on into? Right then and there you're like, oh man, might as well rip up my session notes. Like,
yep, pretty much.
That is too funny. But I really enjoy that. That's what makes DMing fun, is when your players go off script and then it turns into more of an improv game and stuff like that, and it's a lot of fun when that happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, when you're making your games and stuff like that, where do you tend to get your inspiration from?
A couple places for this campaign. Like for the plot and the overall world, I'll say Legend of Korra season 2, where the spirit world becomes a part of the physical world, and that's all I'm gonna say on it.
What's Legends of Korra?
Oh, it's the Avatar: The Last Airbender. Or maybe
okay, yeah.
It's the sequel series.
Okay.
The Avatar after Aang, and so it's a cartoon. And
yeah.
In the second season, the spirit world kind of merges with the physical world in certain places, especially around like the main city that the show is based in. And so I'm kind of borrowing from that a little bit with how the plane of magic is kind of seeping into the material plane.
Oh, that's cool. That's I play in Eberron. I don't know if you ever heard of or played in Eberron, but they have I think it's called Counter Munius or something like that, and that's when like the planes are kind of seeping into the to the material world, like you've mentioned and stuff like that, and then there's like magical crossovers between, like if there's the Fey plane, then wherever the counter Moonius, I don't know how to say it is or whatever, there'll be like a lot of Fey activities in that area. It's a really is that kind of similar to like what's going on in your world too?
Yes. It's not a natural occurrence in our campaign. And that's something that the players are investigating. That's
Okay. That's a
like,
cool point to what's Adventure Hook?
yes. It's kind of, they have two main plots that they are kind of investigating at the same time. They have the cultist plot and they have the rift plot, the rifts into the plane of magic. And at first they were not sure if they were separate, but they have since learned that they are two separate occurrences and one has nothing to do with the other.
Mm.
But yeah, and then other places I get my inspiration from, my favorite band is They Might Be Giants. Have you ever heard of them?
No, I haven't. No.
They did the theme song for Malcolm in the Middle. I don't know if you ever saw
No
the
way,
show.
really? Oh yeah, I love Malcolm in the Middle. That show
Yeah,
was awesome growing up.
yeah. And then on Tiny Toons Adventures, they had Istanbul, not Constantinople, that song. And they had like a little short to go with it. You may or may not have seen that as a child.
No, I'm sorry. All I'm thinking about right now is like, you're not the boss of me now.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I just got that like playing in the back of my head.
yeah, they did that. So they have a song called Birdhouse in Your Soul, and they have
Oh.
another song called A Self Called Nowhere. And so I plucked Birdhouse from that song and I plucked Nowhere from that other song just because I like the band so much.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are a couple other songs that I haven't really done anything with, but they feel like this is not your typical band that sings about like love and loss and stuff like that. Sometimes they sing about like the thermostat or a metal detector or
This is
somebody
just
who thinks that they are a famous designer from like the 50s. And they have
super random.
yes, they have very odd inspirations for their songs. And so the things that come out are have very RPG quality to me because they have a lot of um characters in their songs that are inanimate objects or animals or something like that. And so it's very easy to just take that point of view and um look at things differently. And so you could imbue like for example in Birdhouse in Your Soul, it's about a well it's there are different interpretations, but it's potentially about a lamp um like singing a song to a nightlight.
What the fuck?
Yeah. Um
A
yeah.
lamp singing a song to a nightlight? That's awesome.
Yeah. So those are places where I get my inspiration from.
Like I get my inspiration from lamp singing to nightlights.
Yeah.
That's you know what's funny is I've never really been able to use music as inspiration, but through a few people that I've interviewed, I'm finding out that people using music as inspiration is quite common.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I can't sit down and listen to a song or something like that. Like I could feel the tempo and the beat, and I know the difference between like a hype up song and a sad sappy song, but I don't know, I'm not able to draw inspiration from it. I tend to draw a lot from pictures and stuff like that. Like I'm really heavy on like artists, like Pinterest is a godsend to me for ideas and stuff like that. But the music's really cool. I should try to start focusing on that maybe and trying to use it as a little bit more of a inspirational tool.
Yeah, and I really need to get into Pinterest or something. Like it hadn't occurred to me. It was an interaction I had with somebody else on Twitter like a couple weeks ago who was talking about writing a book, which is not unlike GMing a game. You have to plan everything out and
Mm-hmm.
make it all fit together. And so she was talking about like using her mood boards that she had created to give herself inspiration. And I was like, it never occurred to me to do that for the campaign, and I still need to do it. I haven't done it. I do it
Oh,
for characters, but characters I intend to play, not characters that I create for GMing purposes. So I really need to do that.
I like for example, my players right now are on a ship sailing in the ocean. And I just like all I did is I just go on Pinterest and I type in like fantasy ships. And then I see a picture that I like, I click on it, and then you know how like Pinterest pops up all like similar
Hmm.
looking things below it. And then from there it's just a rabbit like a hole that I just go down, and I'm in there for like hours just saving and pinning and stuff like that. But Pinterest is a fantastic tool, I think, for inspiration, especially if you take inspiration like I do through art, which I feel like's got to be a pretty common
Hmm.
tool for people to use. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's inspiration's I that's like the I don't know, I'm always just looking for more inspiration and stuff like that. You know what I mean? I'm always trying to find where people get their inspiration from, because it's that's half the reason why I started this podcast, was because like it's just cool seeing how people are able to take these ideas and stuff like that, and then I can like take little bits and pieces of their ideas and throw them in my world and stuff like that. Like for example, your player thing that you mentioned earlier, where you type out questions to the GM, like
Hmm.
that's exactly what I'm after. And it's so awesome that you say that, because like now that's something that I can throw into my game, and hopefully other people do too, that like eventually stumble across this.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Because
Yeah.
it's a great tool. It gets you on the same page as your players, and you it gets the player to think like a GM, like what aspects of this character can be exploited is the wrong word, but it's more or less exploited for story purposes.
Yeah, yeah, I get what you mean 100%. It's like when I'm like talking to my fiance and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to try to make my like, you know, you like, oh, my character hates this, so I'm going to do it to them." She's like, "Why would you do that?" And I'm like, "Oh, because I don't know, it's emotion." Like I don't
Yeah,
I really don't know. I don't know, man. I need some sort of emotion to get drawn out of this game, otherwise it's going to be a flop.
yeah,
Like, but
for
it is,
the character growth.
yeah, character growth's a really good way to put. I think every character should have flaws. I like to run very morally
Yes,
gray games, and I think flaws are a huge, huge thing that every character should have.
yes. And to bring the conversation back to Savage Worlds for a second.
Yep.
When you go through character creation, the first thing you do is select your attributes. The second thing you do is select your character's hindrances. And so
Oh,
they are actual, and they usually have a mechanical cost. Like if you're an outsider, it'll be like negative tutor persuasion rolls from people who are not from your
well, that is
race or city
awesome.
or background or bad luck. You start with one less Benny per session. And I've actually taken the bad luck hindrance like before, even though it's mechanically not good for me, it makes sense for the character. And so you create a bunch of flaws or drawbacks first before you go into like, oh, what skills do you have? And it's just a really great way to mechanically tie in your backstory and get a feeling for how a character will react in situations. I love it. And I actually did it for the background document I'm doing for the D&D character that I have. Even though it won't mechanically matter in our game, I put a note to it. I was like, this is from Savage Worlds, but I like it. So
Yeah, it's
I'm
well,
using
flaws.
it.
Yeah, flaws are really. I don't know. No character. I don't know. Yeah, you're playing heroes and stuff like that, but I mean, every character's got to have a flaw of some sorts. Even if it's something as like simple as he just owes a debt, right? Like, and that
Yeah.
could be legit school loans. I've Korak uh was in student loan debt for his archaeology background, and that was part of the reason why he was going around and adventuring to
That's
repay the debt.
really funny. I like that a lot.
Yes, yeah, so he was like collecting stones to sell and stuff like that to repay and the adventuring stuff. He basically used artifacts. He's like, okay, I'm gonna go find all the sickest artifacts and sell them to museums, and pay my student loans back.
That's
that was,
really cool.
and that was Korak's whole reason for adventuring, and it was so much fun. Like, because it was actually like I like actually started caring about money. Like the DM gave me a how much debt Korak was in, and then like all of a sudden I was like actually going to banks and stuff like that to pay off debts. It was it was fun.
That's
The game's
amazing.
really, you could do so much with it. Yeah, so we are getting a little tight on time here. But do you have any final words or anything you want to say before we part ways?
Anything I want to say? Just, there are a lot of people out there who, like me, start with D&D. And what I'll just say is there's no reason to just stop with D&D. Like there are
Mhm.
more RPGs out there. There are tons of RPGs out there. And it's possible there might be one that fits better than D&D for you for the type of game you want to play. And so I would just encourage your listeners to branch out, because initially I didn't want to change either. My brother had gotten into Savage Worlds and had to convince me to try to change, because change is difficult and you want to stick with the thing even though it might not necessarily be the thing that is best for you. And so I just want to encourage everybody to try new things, especially in
Yeah,
the tabletop RPG world.
there's a lot of cool tabletop RPGs out there, like Savage Worlds, Call of Cthulhu. I keep on hearing about Monster of the Week.
Yes.
And those are, there's so many more out there than just D&D, and that's why I kind of like, I mean, I only play D&D, but that's just because I'm too lazy to really learn any other systems, even though I'm super into learning other systems, like,
Hmm.
or I want to try them, like Savage Worlds for sure. I definitely want to give Call of Cthulhu a shot. I just need to
Yeah.
find people that are interested in Call of Cthulhu. um which is, I thought a lot more people were into Lovecraftian horror, but I guess not. Yeah, but Ellen, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me tonight. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I definitely picked up a lot from you. That was definitely learning for me.
Well, thank you. I'm really pleased to hear that. And
Oh,
yeah, I loved it. Thank you so much for having
I
me.
yeah, it was a ton of fun. I listened to before today while I was working. I listened to your episode. I think it was 25. I think is out right now.
Oh yeah?
Of your podcast. Yeah, just to be like, a little prepared and stuff like that. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed your podcast. Like I like your little last time on Birdhouse Mysteries at the
Oh, thank
start.
you.
Yeah, I was like, ooh, cool. I'm like watching a soap opera right now. Let's go. It was yeah, it was really really good. So I hope if maybe my one or two listeners that I got right now, maybe if they'll swing on over to your Birdhouse Mysteries and give it a go. But yeah, Ellen, thank you so much, and I hope to see you around. And you're actually in a lot of the same discords I'm in, so I know I'm going to see you around.
Yeah, definitely.
And alrighty, so thank you, and I will talk to you later.
Thank you. Bye-bye.